Hey everyone, Jordan here from Gills and Bills Outdoors. Sitting in the basement today getting ready for ice season. We got some new rods and we got some new triggers for our Automatic Fisherman. So I figured I'd put a little video together for you guys and show you how we set these things up. So first things first is we got the new triggers. The original trigger that comes with is a 6-inch trigger. We went with the 7.5-inch trigger. Reason we did that is because we like to use longer rods, 36, 38s. And with those 36s and 38s loaded into the 6-inch trigger, you're putting a lot of tension on that rod. That rod is curled back on itself pretty aggressively, and it's also setting the hook a lot harder. So the point of the 7.5 is to relax that rod a little bit, relax that hook set a little bit, and hopefully you get a lot better hookup percentage as well, because you're not just jacking that fish in the jaw and ripping it right through its mouth every time. So we get this 7.5 trigger in here. I like to use the top hole on the arm when setting these things up. With the longer rods, it seems to work best for me. When you take and you put this new trigger on, you want to make sure you're not threading it too far past the backside of this nut, because what you're doing then is you're actually shortening the length of the shaft, so you're really counteracting what you're trying to do here. So 7.5-inch trigger in. Hopefully you still got your little black tool from when you originally bought your Automatic Fisherman. If not, you can use the pliers. I like to use the tool. I try to keep one with me out on the ice in case something gets bumped or whatever. The tool keeps this pin from getting bent in the wrong place, and if it gets bent in the wrong place, it could create issues further down the road. So you just take that pin, bend it back towards the handle of the rod just a little bit. Depending on what you're doing is how sensitive you need to create or make this trigger. If you're fishing for pike, using big minnows and stuff, you're gonna have to bend that back a little further so the minnow isn't setting the trigger off. I do a lot of walleye fishing, so I like that hair trigger. I don't want that walleye to feel any resistance at all. So that's about what I do, is just a little bit. No exact science, everybody likes it a little different. So now we got the rods here. If you look, when you first buy the rod, the eyelet is normal. There's no bend in it. But one thing that I like to do is I take that eyelet and I actually bend it out flat. The reason I do that is so when it's engaged into this, it'll actually slide off of the pin instead of pop off the pin. It seems to have been working good for me the last couple years. I've pretty much do it on all my Automatic Fisherman rods now, and I like that it's a slide instead of a pop. So you get this rod loaded into here onto the trigger. When you get it loaded, make sure you don't wrap the line around the trigger. When you get this in here, you want to make sure that you're creating a gap between that eyelet and the shaft of the trigger. And why that is because if anything ever gets wet, which it'll get wet at some point, it happens, it'll actually freeze to each other, and in turn you'll end up missing a fish because your line will be frozen to the shaft and it won't have the ability to be pulled down, so you'll end up missing that fish because it'll feel the resistance. Take your inline bobber, hook that on there. So now as you're doing this, as you're coming up, you want to just pay attention. You want to jiggle that shaft around a little bit, because that's what your minnow's going to do, and that's what the fish is going to do as it's taking it. It's going to move that shaft around. So if you have this too sensitive, this inline bobber will never even have a chance to get all the way up to the top of the rod, which in turn it'll set the hook with slack in the line, and it's not really something you want. You're not getting a very good positive hook set. You'll end up probably missing more fish than you would like to. So make sure you jiggle it a little, play with it, make sure it's not gonna come out as it's coming up. When you get to the top, you want to pay attention. If you feel any resistance as this trigger is about to let loose, so does the fish. So this is where it's kind of critical for you to just play and see where you like it, is really what it comes down to. Come up to the top, pay attention. There wasn't really much resistance there, which in turn means the fish isn't going to feel that resistance, which is what you're looking for. I may sit there and dial it in, play with it a little more, and make sure it's where I like it. But overall, that's about where I like to have mine at. So one of the big tips I'd like to say is, for me, again, this eyelet, if you're walleye fishing, I really like to bend that eyelet flat. It seems to work best for me. Bending that pin just a hair back is where I like to have it. And hopefully you guys like the video. You guys like the little tips that I have on setting the Automatic Fisherman up, and hope you guys are getting just as excited for ice fishing season as I am. Tight lines, guys.